Some of the things a man may have to forsake in following Christ, he has not to forsake because of what they are in themselves. Neither nature, art, science, nor fit society is of those things a man will lose in forsaking himself. They are God's, and have no part in the world of evil, the false judgments, low wishes, and unrealities generally that make up the conscious life of the self which has to be denied. Such will never be restored to the man. But in forsaking himself to do what God requires of him, his true work in the world, that is, a man may find that he has to leave some of God's things, not to repudiate them, but for the time to forsake them, because they draw his mind from the absolute necessities of the true life in himself or in others. He may have to deny himself in leaving them, not as bad things, but as things for which there is not room, until those of paramount claim have been so heated that these will no longer impede but further them. Then he who knows God will find that knowledge opens the door of his understanding to all things else. He will become able to behold them from within, instead of having to search wearily into them from without. This gave to King David more understanding than had all his teachers. Then will the things he has had to leave be restored to him 100-fold. So will it be in the forsaking of friends. To forsake them for Christ is not to forsake them as evil. It is not to cease to love them. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? It is not to allow their love to cast even a shadow between us and our Master, to be content to lose their approval, their intercourse, even their affection, where the Master says one thing and they another. It is to learn to love them in a far higher, deeper, tenderer, truer way than before, a way which keeps all that was genuine in the former way, and loses all that was false. We shall love their selves and disregard our own. I do not forget the word of the Lord about hating father and mother. I have a glimpse of the meaning of it, but dare not attempt explaining it now. It is all against the self, not against the father and mother. There is another kind of forsaking that may fall to the lot of some, and which they may find very difficult, the forsaking of such notions of God and his Christ as they were taught in their youth, which they held nor could help holding at such times as they began to believe, of which they have begun to doubt the truth, but to cast away which seems like the parting with every assurance of safety. There are so-called doctrines long accepted of good people, which how any man can love God and hold, except indeed by fast closing of the spiritual eyes, I find it hard to understand. If a man care more for opinion than for life, it is not worth any other man's while to persuade him to renounce the opinions he happens to entertain. He would but put other opinions in the same place of honor, a place which can belong to no opinion whatever. It matters nothing what such a man may or may not believe, for he is not a true man. By holding with a school he supposes to be right, he but bolsters himself up with the worst of all unbelief, opinion calling itself faith, unbelief calling itself religion. But for him who is in earnest about the will of God, it is of endless consequence that he should think rightly of God. He cannot come close to him, cannot truly know his will, while his notion of him is in any point that of a false God. The thing shows itself absurd. If such a man seem to himself to be giving up even his former assurance of salvation, in yielding such ideas of God as are unworthy of God, he must none the less, if he will be true, if he would enter into life, take up that cross also. He will come to see that he must follow no doctrine, be it true as word of man could state it, but the living truth, the Master himself. Good souls many will one day be horrified at the things they now believe of God. If they have not thought about them, but given themselves to obedience, they may not have done them much harm as yet. But they can make little progress in the knowledge of God, while, if but passively, holding evil things true of him. If, on the other hand, they do think about them, and find in them no obstruction, They must indeed be far from anything to be called a true knowledge of God. But there are those who find them a terrible obstruction, and yet imagine, or at least fear them true. Such must take courage to forsake the false in any shape, to deny their old selves in the most seemingly sacred of prejudices, and follow Jesus, not as he is presented in the tradition of the elders, but as he is presented by himself, his apostles, and the Spirit of truth. There are traditions of men after Christ as well as before him, and far worse, as making of none effect higher and better things, and we have to look to it, how we have learned Christ.